cartel world can sound cool, or at least intriguing. Big names like El Chapo and El Mencho have made their way into popular series, and millions of people want to know more about the insides of their dark world. Well, if you look deep enough, the cartel world is really sickening. Some of the things sicarios do to other cartel members are worse than death and more brutal than any horror movie you've ever seen. In today's video, we'll be exploring the gut-wrenching death of Commander Bebe, who was caught in the crossfire of the war between Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel. His punishment was just as shocking as El Cholo's demise at the hands of El Mencho. Without further ado, let's dive into the Los Zetas Gulf Cartel War and Commander Bebe's horrifying death. Trigger warning, this video contains very graphic descriptions of torture and murder. Watch at your own risk. To understand why Commander Bebe ended up like he did, we need to go back a few years to the beginnings of Los Zetas. The core of the Zetas' beliefs stand in their very name. Los Zetas means the Z's, and in Mexico, this is the tactical radio code for military officers. Los Zetas were the first militarized cartel because they literally started out as an army. In 1999, Los Zetas took shape as the Gulf Cartel's army. After the Gulf's leader was arrested and extradited to the US in 1996, there was a 3-year-long power struggle within the cartel, and some drug lords were desperate to bring some stability to the cartel again. So the Gulf Cartel kingpin at the time, Ociel Cardenas Guillen, hired a lieutenant and army deserter to recruit 30 more violent deserters from the military special forces. He also assassinated the Gulf's co-leader, Salvador Gomez Herrera, aka La Chava. La Chava was his friend, but Guillen was desperate to be the only one in charge. He thus earned the nickname Friend Killer, which is pretty telling of his character. It was the lieutenant he hired, Arturo Guzman de Sina, who named the army after his former radio code, Z1. This might sound cool. Finally, a cartel got organized, right? Sadly, this only made the Gulf Cartel more violent.
The first set that he recruited was Arturo Guzman de Sena. So what you saw was a change in the way drug cartels fought with violence. It was no longer those gang members with shaved heads and tattoos fighting with pistols and knives. It was militarized style, fighting like military units. And once they did it, this was spread across to every cartel in Mexico. The
Gulf Cartel quickly became one of the most powerful cartels in Mexico. They were already up there, but now they had a hyper-organized army full of militarized weapons and specially trained soldiers. Who could stand in their way? The Zetas generals enjoyed their newfound power so much, they started glorifying brutality for the sake of it. Soon enough, the worst sicarios got medals of honor for their impressive kill count or monstrous brutality. This was happening in the early 2000s. Around the same time, the Mexican government declared its infamous war on drugs. In an ironic twist, this war made cartel violence much worse. Now, cartels were openly killing cops too, and their killing methods only got more violent. In 2002, Arturo de Sena was killed by the Mexican military. The military was employing a long-known strategy known as the Kingpin strategy. Eliminate cartel leaders and bring their cartel down. This had worked a decade before in Colombia with Pablo Escobar. But now, it would lead to pure chaos. After Ociel Cardenas was arrested and extradited to the US, Los Zetas, Gulf Cartel's army, took over the cartel, and this worked better than they ever expected. Their paramilitary style made them no match for a single drug lord with a claim to the throne.
You had this small unit which grew and grew, and that is the Zetas inside the Gulf Cartel, until eventually it was like a whole army within the Gulf Cartel that would rise up saying, we don't need you anymore, we're going to take this for ourselves, and then break away from the Gulf Cartel and form its own organization.
But this didn't mean other Gulf Cartel leaders just let them take charge. So in 2010, the Los Zetas broke off from the Gulf Cartel and founded their own cartel, bearing the same name. This started an all-out war and unprecedented bloodshed in Mexico. Decapitated bodies were strung up from bridges and body parts were left lying on the side of the road just as a message to the rival cartel. In August 2010, police officers discovered an unmarked grave. Investigating the area, their blood froze as they discovered the bodies of 72 undocumented immigrants. Turns out, Los Zetas stopped them in between towns and killed them all based on a mere suspicion. They were afraid the immigrants would be recruited by the Gulf Cartel. These poor people hadn't even been in contact with the cartel. They had been butchered on a hunch. And from there on out, it only got worse. In April of the following year, the Zetas stopped a group of buses headed towards a Mexican town on the border with Texas. 193 people were kidnapped and taken to a ranch in San Fernando. Dozens of women were violated, and the men who were killed were tortured for hours prior to this. Other men were forced to fight each other to the death, while Los Zetas members stood by, watched, and laughed. Whoever survived this ordeal was recruited into the Zetas cartel. Again, the Zetas did this because they suspected these people would be recruited into the Gulf Cartel for the war. In August 2011, the Zetas also set fire to a casino, killing 50 people in a hellish, gruesome way. The reason? The casino's owner didn't want to pay the protection money. And when a few Zeta soldiers found out that 2 men from the city of Allende had reportedly stolen money from the cartel, they decided to punish the entire town for it. An army of militarized sicarios stormed Allende and destroyed everything in sight. Somewhere between 300 and 500 people died. Imagine having a kill count so big, you can't even estimate a real number. 80 homes were destroyed with heavy military machinery. Allende was reduced to ashes, and whoever managed to flee became a shadow of the person they once were.
Y les digo a mis hijos, levántense, le digo, porque quién sabe qué está pasando en la calle. Digo, vístanse y nos salimos. Y todo empezó a tronar, ya no había luz, todo empezó a tronar, tanques, camionetas. Pero sí, ahí perdí a mis niños y a mi hija.
This is just for context, guys. This is what's happening in the early 2010s thanks to the Zetas and the Gulf Cartel. Meanwhile, other cartels are forming their own armed wings, realizing they really had to up their violent game if they wanted to stay in the game. So Los Zetas created a horrible legacy that lasts to this day, where torture and murder are normalized. And it was the army commanders who got the worst punishments when they got caught. They would suffer a fate worse than death, and it would be filmed and posted online with a clear message to the rival cartel. This is what will happen to all of you on the wrong side of the war. Enter Commander Bebe. Commander Bebe was a plaza boss for Los Zetas in the San Luis Potosi area. He would collect money from other smaller cartels and oversee business in the plaza. As a commander, Bebe was a pretty public figure. That means he was easier to capture by the Zetas' arch-enemies, the Gulf Cartel. In 2013, Commander Bebe was kidnapped by the Gulf Cartel and they decided to make an example out of him. The horrifying video of his murder opens up with Bebe laying on the ground on his back, with his hands tied behind his back. His shirt has been pulled over his head to blind him and instill even more fear. He's surrounded by 3 or 4 assassins, all equipped with weapons and torture objects. First, one of the captors grabs a wooden plank and hits Commander Bebe's feet over and over again. The video skips forward a few seconds and we see Bebe's feet bleeding profusely through his socks. It's already a gruesome sight, but it gets worse. Much worse. The video cuts again. This time, the captors have removed the shirt from Commander Bebe's head. An assassin stuffs his mouth with a gag. Then, he takes out a small knife and slowly slices off Bebe's left ear. Poor Bebe is screaming in agony, but no more than a grunting noise can be heard because of the gag. If this wasn't horrifying enough, then the sicario puts a sliced ear in his mouth. The video skips forward again. Poor Commander Bebe is still alive, and the captors have just begun his torture. Now they have hooked up jumper cables to a car battery. They electrocute his chest and face so hard, sparks can be seen flying. Again, Bebe can't even scream. Finally, the video cuts to the last scene. It shows 2 assassins beheading Commander Bebe with the same small knife they used earlier. At this point, he's already dead. His decapitation is just a display for the camera and for all the Zetas watching the video. The assassins put Bebe's head on his chest and proudly take photos of their deed. It's impossible to grasp how this group of people is taking pleasure in doing this. Imagine how desensitized to violence you have to be to even think of doing this. Before we go on, guys, please don't search for this video online. It's deeply traumatizing to watch something this gruesome happen to a living being in real life. Stick to horror movies. You'll be better off this way. After the murder, the Gulf Cartel releases the video and the following message. This is what is going to happen to all the Zetas that are thinking of entering San Luis Potosi. We demonstrate it with work and not with Narco banners. Sincerely, El CDG. Heartbreakingly, this was far from the only video of this kind emerging online during that time. The Zetas Gulf Cartel war normalized extreme violence in Twitter videos. It's disturbing to think we're not even surprised when another video like this comes up on the dark web. It shouldn't be this way. The Zetas Gulf Cartel remains the bloodiest cartel war in Mexico to this day. However, Los Zetas' legacy brings something else to the mix. Los Zetas' paramilitary style inspired another psychopathic drug lord, El Mencho, the leader of the brutal Jalisco New Generation cartel. El Mencho founded the CJ&G after the Milenio cartel crumbled in 2009. Around the same time, Los Zetas split from the Gulf Cartel. As soon as he founded his cartel, he used all his previous expertise from his months as a cop to form an impeccable, military-trained army. This meant that the CJ&G conducted super-organized ambushes and attacks, much like Los Zetas. And with the money they made from drug trafficking, El Mencho and his men bought the biggest, loudest, and most terrifying military weapons they could find.
And in July, footage would emerge of that CG&G convoy. These gunmen call themselves the Elite Group and pledge allegiance to El Mencho. They're armed with assault rifles with grenade launchers attached to the barrel, heavy machine guns, and also this gun. This is a .50 caliber sniper rifle. It's a powerful weapon that the CJ&G loves to show off.
Because of Los Zetas and the CJ&G, murders in Mexico skyrocketed to unprecedented numbers. In 2017, the murder rate peaked at over 31,000 people, the worst year in recorded Mexican history. And as the government is desperately trying to control the situation, the notorious CJ&G is only getting more violent.
The Jalisco New Generation cartel took the fight to the next level, shooting down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade.
Tonight, the DEA is offering $10 million for information leading to the arrest of the Mexican drug kingpin known as El Mencho.
CJ&G's power snowballed as it grew its narcotics business. Soon it was weapon dealing, kidnapping, extortion, murder, and pretty much every crime and illicit business you can imagine. They even invaded the avocado trade in Michoacan, killing farmers and stealing their businesses. And the more businesses they control, the more violent they get. In fact, CJ&G uses fear as its currency instead of bribes like the other cartels.
Cartel Jalisco, they are very well consolidated as one group. And so that means that they can really put up really organized attacks against the Mexican government. And all that violence is only to have leverage in the negotiations with the government, with politicians, right?
Sadly, the CJ&G has such an aggressive tactic that the government is simply afraid of losing any more civilian lives. So they just submit to the cartel and El Mencho's bloody desires.
They create these chaos to go and sit with the local politicians and say like, okay, do you want more or shall we negotiate this stuff?
The more the government gives in, the more power they get. Today, the CJ&G is much more powerful than Los Zetas ever was.
Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJ&G, is the single criminal organization most responsible for these deaths on both sides of the border.
In short, El Mencho took Los Zetas' organized brutality to a whole new level. But if it wasn't for Los Zetas, horrifying cartels like CJ&G wouldn't exist. And just like other cartels created their military wings to stand a chance in the cartel game, other cartels became more brutal to stand a chance against the CJ&G and the famous Sinaloa cartel. It's hard to see a way out. As of 2023, violence in Mexico is only getting worse, and terrifying videos like Commander Bebe still appear online, long after the Zetas Gulf War is over. Is there any hope for the poor people who live in those areas? And can the government do anything to end this constant massacre? Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on today's video? Do you know of other victims of cartel wars with terrifying stories? Let me know in the comments, and before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you all next time.